You ain't seen nothing yet. Hello, 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 diva. Yeah. All right. We are doing American history. We're going to talk about some things that have been left out. We're going to go into kind of take it back to the Columbus, because it's difficult to talk about the history of the United States of America unless you talk about this Columbus character. So we're going to get into him a little bit. We're going to talk about what happened when the British came over. And we're going to talk about how the Moroccans finally became involved in this on this session. So I'm going to get into this stuff a little bit and talk about some things that are not spoken about so that we can understand what's really going on. Now, I'm going to start by, I want to say this because there's this movement. It's called the Moorish movement. And I don't want it to be seen that I have disdain for someone who calls themselves a Moor. What I do have a disdain for is the way that history is being polished over by different groups. I don't like to see the Albion do it, and I don't like to see melanated people do it. When we're not being honest about, what the different groups were in this land, then yeah, I have a problem with it, and I've got to come forward and present the information that I know. And if anybody can come back and show something different, let's have a discussion once again on the facts. You're not to believe anything I say. The thing is to get the information and then to do your own research. And if you don't know it, please, again, avoid regurgitating information that you've gotten from others that you haven't done your own research on, because I tend to shred people when they do that. It's easy because you don't even know what you're regurgitating. So when we're talking about these facts, let's talk facts and not, what you heard somebody say or what your beliefs or your feelings or your thoughts are. Let's talk about the facts and what they are. And then we can move forward and understand what's really going on with history. What's going on, brother, Mr. Carlo? So we're going to go through this. We're going to break some things down. And then, again, if you have any information, let's, get some facts so we can try to close up some of these gaps that are going on in history. Now, I want to go back and I want to deal with this Columbus character. We're talking about 1492 when this character supposedly came to the land known as the Americas, which he didn't make it to the central parts of America. He made it to some outer lying areas of what we know as the Americas. Now, here's the deal. When we're talking about, before we get into 1490, let's talk about 1490 just before that. Because by this time, Spain and Queen Isabella had defeated this sultan who was in Spain at the time. And he had, he had ceded all of his territories to the Queen of Spain. All right. So he had been defeated. And we can go back in history and look at this. This guy was defeated. He turned everything over to the Queen of Spain. And then shortly thereafter, she had started kicking everyone in the country out who was not a Christian. So if you didn't pledge to be a Christian, she was kicking you out of the territory. Now we come up to this character we know as Christopher Columbus. Well, here's the deal with this character. This guy is a convert. Now, some of my sources will say that he was a Muslim that went from Muslim to Christianity because he didn't want to get kicked out of the country. And then other sources will say he was Jewish and he went from Jewish to being Christian rather, because he didn't want to get kicked out of the country. Let's understand this though, especially when we're talking about Jews. Jews at that time were very, they were disliked and they were melanated. These were melanated, mostly males, and they were sailors. And they were known to participate in black magic, black business principles, where they would constantly trick people into doing negative things and enslaving them. So they were not liked, and they were being kicked out of a lot of the different countries because of their practices. And a lot of these people who were these Jews that we're talking about, they come from this group known as the Phoenicians. Well, these Phoenicians were very well known for doing these same type of things that these Jews were. And these Phoenicians, as well as these Jews, they were Semitic people. Now, talk about Semitic in my last document, where we're talking about Hamitic, Shemitic, and Japheth. We're talking about the three sons of Noah. Now, a lot of people look at this Bible and they'll think, oh, it's allegorical and it's not real. And let me tell you something about the Bible. Again, I just got finished talking about the Bible. What I didn't mention is that, again, it is a powerful book, and everybody wants to think it is a religious piece. The religion is just using it to keep people ignorant. But that book is a historical document book. It is a science book, a math book, a dietary law book, a legal book. I can go on and on. The book has a lot of power and a lot of, you're going to gain a lot of knowledge if you read with comprehension. However, that being said, again, about the Bible, my main thing is that there are these people who were a Jewish people that were known to be Phoenicians and Jews, and they were melanated, and they were involved in these practices, and a lot of different countries had started to kick them out, and that was including Spain at this time. So this Columbus character was he was about to be kicked out. Now, what he wanted to do was he wanted to go and spot this land that he had heard about. All right. He had heard about this land. Now, let's understand this, what's going on in the Americas. In the Americas, there was trade going on between, the Americas and the China side. There was trade going on between the Americas and China. They were sending, we got reports and, documents showing these people are sending over elephants to China and all kind of other stuff that they're shipping from the Americas to China. So there was trade going that way, but there was no trade reportedly going from the Americas to what we know as Africa today. All right, so now you've got this Columbus character that has heard about the Americas. Convinced the Queen of Spain, the Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, hey, there's some land over there. I want a ship so that I can go over there. I want you to fund this this trip. Now, let's understand this. I got to point this out because, listen, talk, to my Albion friends or what have you. And a lot of times they'll say stuff like, well, race is not important. Okay. You say that, but the deal is everything that we're reading today is trying to, quote unquote, whitewash everything that went on in history. And that has to be told. We got to understand the truth about what went on in history. So when we're looking at this, let's understand that Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand were melanated people. As a matter of fact, all original royalty were people, all of them. Dutch, Finland, I don't care who, England, all the original royalty were melanated people. So we've got to understand that because at this time, the Albion was not high on the totem pole. They weren't. And they were people who were just coming out of, what do they call the Black Ages or the Dark Ages. All right. And so here we are where we've got a situation where you've got this supposedly, because that's what history is trying to make Columbus out to be an Albion, when, again, all the Jews at that time were melanated. All the Muslims at that time were melanated. The royalty at that time was melanated. The people with money at that time were melanated. So here you got this person that they want us to believe is Albion, who just converted from either Islam or being a Jew, to Christianity, and you want us to believe that it's an Albion. I'm just suggesting to you, go do some research, because not only when he sailed with a lot of Jews. They were melanated. And these Jews that he was selling with, they knew certain language. And he specifically got these people on his ship because he had translators, because he figured of the people that he was going to have to do business with when he got there, if and when he got there. So again, these are people at this time, Columbus and the king, the queen, Isabel and King Ferdinand, they didn't believe, and most people didn't believe, that this America land existed. And this is why he had to convince them, Columbus had to convince them that, hey, I think there's some land over there. I need you to pay for it. Now, understand this real quick, too. Here's this character who's supposedly Albion. First of all, how do you get in touch with royalty in a lower state? I mean, even now today, I don't have Barack Obama's number in my cell phone. Do you? I mean, it's not like, you're just going to walk up to royalty and convince them, hey, I want to go over here and do this, and I want you to put some money into it. Also, how did he learn to sail? This sailor jobs were mostly melanated people. Again, these Jews, these Phoenicians, these Moors, they were melanated people. How did he learn to sail? You're not going to come to me as royalty and tell me you want me to pay for your trip, and you're going to be sailing, and you haven't had any kind of sailing under your belt. You had to have sailed. Where do you get the education to navigate? You know how difficult it is to even understand astrology today? They're not even teaching that today. So where do you get the knowledge? What school did you go to learn how to navigate the seas? When we're talking about the stars, that's a serious science. Where did he get this education from as an Albion? So what I'm saying to you is, we're being told things in history about who these people were is being misrepresented. And I need to, put my information out there. If you got something different, let me know. But what do you have? Everything I'm showing is these were melanated people coming into the land, and Columbus was melanated. All right, so let's get on this now. Columbus gets into the land, and they find these people here. They're considering that he is the founder, or he discovered America when there was already people there. How you discover something where there's already people there? Okay. We've got, after that point, this is when things became heavy in the Americas. The first people the first group that really came in and started doing a lot of work within the Americas, we know of as the British. The British, again, these were melanated people. When we start talking about these Moors coming over from Britain, or the British Moors, or the Brutish Moors, these were melanated people. Let's understand that at that time, and even all the way up to the mid 1800s, the Queen of England was melanated. These were melanated folks. I want you to believe, so when they use the term European, that you automatically think of an Albion. But no, the original Europeans were melanated. When we talk about the original Europeans, we're talking about your Moors of Morocco. We're talking about your British Moors. We're talking about, your Algiers, all those people. Those were your Europeans, because all of that is in Africa. And originally, like when we're talking about Europe, Europe was originally Africa. And the term African was not a prestigious term at that time. It actually was what they called slaves. I'm gonna get into that before I get to that though. Let me get back to this. At this time, the British started coming into the Americas, and they were making contracts with the original Americans. They were making treaties. So I'm going to post a list of the treaties that I have. And in these treaties, this is where the original Americans were subjugating themselves to Britain, where they agreed to pay taxes to Britain. They agreed to work for Britain and be quote unquote corporate slaves. But in these treaties, what they also stated is that they would have control of the land. That was one of the things they wanted to make sure of, is that they maintain control of the land. And so you got to understand, even before the United States of America Corporation, this is the original republic, came into play, there was all of these patents that were put down by the original people, were their land patents in the name of the original Americans. And I'm going to say this right now, and I'm going to put those this list up later, but they did not call themselves Moors. They did not mention, not one time, not one thing about Morocco. So all of this idea that, you know, the Americas belongs to Morocco, I still, again, there's no proof of it. There is no factual evidence of it. There are no documentations of it. And the original people never called themselves Moors. And we can see this in the patents that were claimed between Britain and the original Americans. And you can see how they signed their names. They were not calling themselves Williams and Jones and Johnson and Hancock. No, they had original American names. And I'm going to put the post up so that you can go and look at those treaties for yourself. Look up the original treaties, not somebody's synopsis of what those treaties say. Look up the original treaties. Also, make sure when you get a chance, look up the Iroquois Confederacy. And if you want it, it doesn't allow me to post the actual Iroquois Confederacy or any document up, but if you want it, let me know. But what this original Iroquois Confederacy does is it tells you exactly how women were viewed in society and how what they were to the male. It was like a male could not have a position unless he got it from the woman. She was the owner of everything. And this is what these documents are showing as we go back and we take a look in history. Okay, so we've got the Britain coming over into the Americas. Let's understand what they were doing. They were setting up, first of all, we can go back, the original corporations that they created. Virginia Company was one, and then there was a West India Company. Virginia Company, look it up, West India Company. This took place in the 1600s. The Virginia Company is the very same company that you know of today as the state of Virginia. It's a corporation. It always was a corporation. And again, the original people subjugated themselves. So when you go and look at those treaties, you'll see that the original colonists were your original Americans. That's who the colonists were. That's who was working for Britain. That's who subjugated themselves to Britain. All this stuff about pilgrims and all this stuff, it was the original Americans that were doing it. All right, now let's understand something. Britain is now setting up these colonies, Virginia all the way down to, Georgia. They got 13 colonies. So, as we're told, 13 colonies. Now, during the late 1600s, early 1700s, a group of Moroccans had migrated down into the Americas. They had come into the Americas and they had started setting up a government. These are, as far as my research goes, are the people who are credited with these places called counties. The counties are meant to count things. That's what they are. Now, let us not be misled, because even before they came into the Americas, there were, again, the original people had already been creating all kind. They had castles, they had pyramids, they had all kind of things in the Americas. And again, we got pyramids in the Americas that predate anything in Africa. So let's understand that these people were not. How do they want? They want to make them seem like they were not knowledgeable about constructing things. No, they weren't. They weren't primitive. They had castles and everything, just like that were greater than what we call Africa today. So these were not primitive people. So they're here, and they were, they had all these castles. But then you've got the Britons that came in and they started constructing these colonies. And then you had there's another group of Moroccans that broke off, that want to break off from Morocco. and they started forming what we know as counties. Okay, again, counties count things. Now, when we're talking about the United States of America, which came around in 1777, we have to ask ourselves, who owned the United States of America? Because they want to tell you that Britons did it. They want to tell you that Britons are the ones who wrote the Constitution, or they call them the European. Well, Europeans, once again, were melanated people. But what melanated people were writing this Constitution? Now, again, my research is showing that there was a fraction, again, of these Moroccans that were running the government, but then there was also a fraction of British people who were trying to break away from Britain as well. So you got people like Benjamin Franklin, and then who was on, coming from the British side trying to break away. And then you've got these Moroccans. As a matter of fact, when we're talking about the Continental Congress, there was at least 6 or 7 presidents during that time. And they were all melanated, all of Moroccan. But this is why we're told, the first president was George Washington. Well, how could that be? Because the original United States of America started in 1777. It had to have a president, because otherwise it wouldn't be seen as a true entity. It's not going to be seen as a true corporate entity if it doesn't have a president. It had to have a president. If you're going to tell me 13 years after the fact they got a president, no. There were at least 6 presidents before Washington, and they were all melanated. And from what my research is showing, they were of Moroccan descent. Why are we talking about Moroccan descent? Because when we look at the names, we know these are not original Americans. Who are the people who signed the Constitution? Who are the people who signed the Declaration of Independence? Again, the Declaration of Independence was basically telling Britain, we don't want your rule anymore. We are separating from you. You don't have any control or authority in this land any longer. You've got to understand something, and let me make this clear about what had just happened with that Declaration of Independence. Britain had come over here and constructed, the Virginia Company and Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina, all the way up. And now you've got this group of Americans that are saying, okay, well, these corporations are no longer under your authority. That is called a hostile takeover. That is called a hostile takeover of corporations. And you can imagine if you had a business and somebody did a hostile takeover of your business, you're not going to let that just die. And that's exactly what happened. So you got this group of Moroccans and group of Britons that had broken away, and they're running this corporation called the United States of America Republic. This is the original United States of America, because their thing is, we want to protect everybody's God-given rights. But at the same time, who owned this corporation? This was owned by this group that now were calling themselves Americans. And the fact is that none of them were the original Americans, none of them. If you go and look at the Declaration of Independence, go and look at the original Constitution for the United States of America. Heck, you can look at the Constitution of the United States of America. Ain't not one original American name on that Constitution. So now here's the deal with this. We're trying to understand, well, so now you got to understand an understanding of who's running the United States of America Republic. You got some British and some Moroccans that both broke off. Now, once the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution went down in 1777, now you have Britain that has said, you're going to just take over my corporations like that? Oh, okay, all right. So now what they did was they went to Morocco, Algiers, and all these others, what are known as the Barbary countries. And they went to them and they said, hey, you know what? Britain has a treaty with you, but the United States of America is no longer our territory. So y'all are welcome to do whatever you want to do with it. So understand this. Morocco comes into the picture. Morocco doesn't come into the picture until when? After 1777. We're looking at the time frame of 17 1778 until 1789, right before, or 1787, right before George Washington came into play. What's going on with that? Now, I need y'all to understand something about who Morocco and all these other countries were. When we're talking about the Barbary treaties, we're talking about barbaric people, Barbary. And there's a reason why, because Morocco, Tunis, Algiers, and Tripoli, and one other nation, they were all involved in piracy. They were land stealing pirates, sailors, and thieves. That's what they were. And so, because Britain was so big and strong, she had created a treaty with them such that they wouldn't come in and trample on the territory while Britain was there. But once Britain took over it, and Britain, once Britain left, rather, and she told them, listen, I don't have anything to do with that territory. Y'all welcome to do whatever you want to do with the United States. It was at this point that Morocco started hammering the United States of America's ships when they were trying to sail. See, these were British. These were some of the British that had broken away from Britain, and they're trying to sail with all of these slaves. Well, Morocco would seize them because Morocco was saying, hey, well, y'all need to pay us tribute to come, through these seas. And United States was saying no, was refusing to pay them anything. And and so at this time it was just they were getting hammered, the United States was. And they had to find a way to come up with a treaty between them and these barbaric states. And this is where you got the Barbary treaties that come into play. And these Barbary treaties are going on, once again, Morocco, Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli. All right. And so, one moment. Who is this? Who is this ready to get? All right. So you've got all of these treaties going on between these corporations, because what's going on now is that they're trying to keep from getting their ships seized. Because and let's understand what's on these ships, because again, I told you these were some ships that had broken off from Britain. What they were carrying were slaves, and these were Albion slaves. They're stealing from Sicily. They're stealing them from Europe, which was Africa. That was known as Africa at the time. They're stealing them from Ireland. As children, they're kidnapping them and they're bringing them into the Americas. Other shipments that were coming in with Albion slaves included other nations that wanted to do business with the Americas. Well, you got the Moroccans telling them, okay, well, if you want to do business in the Americas, then you bring us some Albion women. They wanted Albion women as the tribute or the booty. And that's where that term. So they were bringing in these Albion women. And this is, see, let me tell y'all something, because a lot of people be asking me, well, how did the Moors go down? What happened? And one of the things we're not understanding is that when these Moors were making deals with these other nations and saying, well, they got to give us some tribute or some booty. Well, when these women would come in, they were being trained in weaponry and in fighting and battle skills. So it's like you're bringing Trojan horses in here. So they come in here because their job was to infiltrate again from the inside and to rise up against the Moors. And this is where you get your group that's called Daughters of the American Revolution. Look it up. This is where they come from, because these are the Albion women who were concubines to the Moors. And you look up also Moorish bathhouses. Look up Moorish concubine. And then you're going to find out and understand how these women came in here. So you've got all of these Moors in the land, and all of these, and then it's not just them. The original Americans were taking part too, because when we talk about the 5 civilized tribes, they had slaves, and they were participating in this game. So when these people were trying to bring all of these slaves into the Americas, these these fraction of British that broken off, these Moroccans, and even some of the original Americans were participating in getting all of these slaves. When they would bring these slaves in to the Americas, who were they selling them to? Again, the original colonists were the original Americans. So they are participating in this whole deal. And so again, the thing that I need to make a point of is all of these are melanated people. You got your British Moors, they were melanated, a lot of them were amalgamated, but you got your dark-skinned Moroccans from the northern part of Africa. You got your original Americans who were dark-skinned, and then you've got them selling these Albion. Understand, listen, the Albion isn't really what caused the downfall. It's us. All melanated people were fighting against each other. And one of the things we're also not understanding is there was a lot of Albion slaves in the Americas, a lot. And so when we hear the term slave, we automatically think of a melanated person with some chains on their neck and the chains around it. No, the Albion was a slave. And so because we're not understanding the true history of what went on, we're just, we're going with this narrative that we're being told. And once again, the Moroccans did not own the Americas. Even when we look at 1789, there's a treaty, or 1787, there's a treaty between the United States and Morocco. Now, in this treaty, the people who are being called Moors were people of Morocco. This treaty was saying, hey, when our melanated people, our Moors come to there, when they declare that they are Moorish national status or they are Morocco, then you don't have jurisdiction. They have diplomatic immunity. Okay. But then they're also stating that they're a foreign country because they call the people of the Americas Americans. They weren't called Moors. Nobody used that term, but these people coming from Morocco, and maybe it's some British folks. But the original Americans never called themselves Moors, and no documentation anywhere. And one of the problems I have is that, you get people talking about, well, we and them and us and they, and it's like, who is we and them? And make it clear. Stop trying to mix yourself in with the people of antiquity and make it clear. When we're talking about Moors, they are a different people from the original Americans. The fact is that there was a group of people that came from the place we know as North Africa. And even all of the documentation that they shows that they called themselves a foreign corporation. So to keep trying to mix them in, the original people were Moors. No, they weren't. And all of this whole Washita Moors, ain't no Washita M-O-O-R's, it's Washita M-U-U-R, because the term M-U-U-R and M-O-O-R are not the same. M-U-U-R, and I break this down and I'll put that post up as well. But M-U-U-R dealt with people who coming from the Lemuria or the land of Mu. Lemuria or the land of Mu, that's where M-U-U-R comes from. M-O-O-R is a verb, and it means a sailor, it means a job done on a ship. That's what it means. And so when we go and do our research, see, look, and they'll tell you the term, look up mooring, M-O-O-R-I-N-G, look up moored, M-O-O-R-E-D, and they'll tell you it has to do with a job done on a ship. So, people want to tell you, it means black. It means dark skin. No, it doesn't. That's not where the term originally come from. Why? Because those same Moors will tell you that there were Albion Moors. How the hell it mean dark skin if you had Albion Moors? The term originally had nothing to do with skin color, just like the term black had nothing to do with skin color, just like the term white, the term Negro, the term colored had nothing to do with skin color. It had everything to do with a job being done on a ship. That's what Moor means, a job being done on a ship. So then I have other Moors will tell me, anybody can look in and see what the Phoenicians, it comes from the Phoenicians in Mauritania. Okay, let's look up what the Phoenicians are. The Phoenicians were once again a Semitic group of people they lived along the edge of what we know as Middle East today, over there near Saudi Arabia. They lived off of that coast, and they were a Semitic, melanated people, and supposedly associated with the country Mauritania. All right, fine, more. I mean, but once again, these were all sellers. The Phoenicians were all sellers. They couldn't even be considered a nation. They were just a group of sellers who were pirates and black magic and black business people who followed a Jewish faith. They were land stealing thieves, just like the Moors we knew back in the 1800s, where the United States of America had to sign Barbary treaties because they were barbaric people. And people want to say, well, you know, it's the Albion put that term barbaric. No, it was melanated people that put that term on them because they were barbaric people. They would just take things that didn't belong to them, claim areas that didn't belong to them, and then try to force people to make payments to them as bullies. That's what the hell they were. It's like, well, we got the power to do this. We're just going to bully you into doing it. And if you didn't do it, they just steal your ships and declare war on you. That's why they were called barbaric. And again, if you got some facts to prove otherwise, let's hear it. I want facts. Please don't regurgitate stuff to me, because you start talking about some, well, the George Washington letter to the something. Don't do it. Don't do it, because I'm going to rip it up. But if you got some true information that you looked up for yourself that can show proof that somehow the original people called themselves Moors, which we already know they didn't, then let's hear it. This is going to be the same way that they're doing today. They're calling, for example, I was reading this document and it was talking about Black Wall Street. Those were the African Americans back then, and blah blah blah. Those people that call themselves African Americans, but as far as this particular document that I was reading, they were African Americans. Somebody put a retroactive title on them when the term didn't even exist back then. The term African American ain't but damn 30 years old, 40 years old at that. But you want to go and put it on these people, and then the rest of the world will believe, well, they were African Americans. Don't be calling me that. I am not African American, nor black, nor Moor, nor colored, nor Negro, none of that. And so the problem is we don't know what to call ourselves. But the bottom line, I just needed to make sure we understood, again, who was this Columbus character? What happened with the British colonization? And how did the Moroccans become involved? When we hear terms like European, the problem is we're seeing images in our head of Albions. When we see terms like slave, we're seeing images of our head of melanated people with shackles on. This is not how it happened. This is not how it happened. This is why it's important when you see these images, the people who play in this game, when they're showing you these images, they're going to tell you the truth to some degree, but they're going to show you an image that flips that whole narrative around. Everything, the image that they show you, you're not even going to be paying attention to the words they give you. You're just going to see an image. When they show you these melanated people being hung or hanged in the mid 1800s, they're not telling you who they really were. They told you they were slaves. Those weren't slaves. What the hell are you hanging a slave for? Why would you hang? Whose slaves did they belong to? I bet you better not hang my slave that I paid good money for. They weren't slaves. They was Moors that had refused to give up their title, and they've refused to give up their wealth. They've refused to give up their high positions. That's who they were. And so again, we're just getting this narrative that's backwards and incorrect. And there's so many things that are going on in this history, but we're not getting it because we're not studying. So I just want to put that information out there. If you have anything to share, please bring it forth. Let's talk about it. Let's have an intelligent conversation. Again, I don't have any disdain for anyone who wants to call themselves a Moor. The deal is we have to put out the facts about the fact that there were several different melanated groups in this land fighting against each other, and that's where the downfall came, and not from necessarily the Albion, because all they did was just came in and took the spoils of the war after we done beat the hell out of each other. So we got to learn that so we can understand that the same game is still going on. When we start learning that who we are, the truth of who we are, and stop dealing with this skin color and stop trying to make it seem like, oh, it's the Albion coming against us. No, it ain't. Albion doesn't own anything. You need to find out who owns everything, because it's not an Albion. If you say to me, oh, it's the Jew, and they the same, they both got white skin. Okay, well, guess what? Guess what? And pay attention to this. A bird and a bat, they both have wings, they both fly, but they are two totally different animals. A bird and a bat, they both have wings, they both fly. They're two totally different animals. One is a mammal, the other one is not. It lays eggs. And so you have to understand, you got the Albion, who is really a puppet, and then you got another being that's really controlling everything and manipulating everybody like they're puppets. What's the difference? That's why you got to do your research. Diva Laree, thank you for listening. I'm out. Love you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.